Be me, Darren, 27, software engineer. My life isn't a movie script. It's simple. I work, I pay my bills, I have a small apartment that's just clean enough to not be considered a biohazard. The main pillar of my existence is my friends, my crew. There's Simon, my best friend since we were kids, building forts out of couch cushions. He's got a tongue sharper than a razor blade and a sense of humor darker than black coffee, but he's the most loyal person I've ever met. Then there's Ray, the stoic, calm one. Ray's the guy who thinks for a full 10 seconds before he speaks. He's the anchor of the group. And Eugene is there too, just a solid, good-natured dude who's always down for whatever. Our social life is a well-oiled machine. A couple of nights during the week, we'd hop on Discord and play whatever game had our attention. Weekends were usually for gathering at my place or Simon's. The ritual was sacred. We'd order a mountain of greasy food, put on some ridiculous 80s action movie we'd all seen 100 times, and just talk nonsense for hours. We'd quote Arnold Schwarzenegger, debate the physics of a John Woo movie, and make jokes that would probably get us canceled if anyone outside our circle heard them. It was our space. No judgment, no pretense, just four guys who had grown up together, navigating adult life. I wasn't actively looking for a relationship. Dating apps felt like a second job with a terrible success rate. I was content. Then, maybe 8 or 9 months ago, I went to a birthday party for a former colleague. That's where I met Isabel. She was standing by the bookshelf, and we started talking. The conversation was amazing. She was smart, really passionate about her work at some nonprofit, and she had this laugh that made me feel like I was the wittiest guy on the planet. She was beautiful, but it was her intensity that really drew me in. When she talked about something she cared about, her eyes lit up. We exchanged numbers. I didn't think much of it, figured it would fizzle out like most things do, but it didn't. We went on a date the next week, then another. The first couple of months were genuinely great. The honeymoon phase was in full effect. She was thoughtful, she was engaging, we had different interests, but it felt like a good thing. She introduced me to new music, new kinds of movies, new ways of thinking about things. I felt like I was expanding my horizons. I was really, really happy. Naturally, the next step was for her to meet the guys. I wasn't nervous about it at all. My friends are easygoing. They'd always gotten along with any girl I'd brought around before. I framed it as a super casual thing. Pizza and video games at my place, the classic. The night started off normally. The guys came over. We ordered the food. Simon brought a case of beer. Isabel was charming at first. She asked them about their jobs, seemed interested. Then the food arrived. We fired up the console, and the guys slipped into their usual dynamic. We were playing some co-op shooter. Simon was trash-talking the AI enemies in his usual over-the-top way. Ray was making his dry, witty comments. Eugene was just laughing along. I was having a great time, splitting my attention between the game and her, trying to make sure she felt included. But I started to notice a shift in her demeanor. Her smile became a little more fixed, a little less genuine. She stopped participating in the conversation and just started watching. It felt like she wasn't a guest anymore, but an anthropologist observing a strange, primitive tribe. There was a moment when Simon's character in the game got taken out by a ridiculously lucky shot. He threw his hands up and yelled something like, "Of course, the game's programmed with a bias against male success." It was a dumb, obviously sarcastic joke. Ray chuckled. I rolled my eyes, and we moved on. But I saw the look on Isabel's face. It was a flicker of something, like she'd just heard a dog whistle I couldn't perceive. The evening wrapped up a couple of hours later. The guys were their usual polite selves on the way out. "Great to finally meet you, Isabel." As soon as the door closed, the atmosphere in the room changed. I turned to her, smiling. expecting to debrief on how it went. "So, what did you think?" "They're a bit much, but they're good guys." She didn't answer right away. She was staring at the TV screen, where the game's main menu was cycling. Her response was quiet, measured. She told me it was illuminating. She started dissecting the entire evening, piece by piece. It wasn't an angry rant. It was a calm, academic-style breakdown. The guys' trash talk in the game wasn't just them having fun. It was a performance of aggressive masculinity. Our love for old action movies wasn't a nostalgic hobby. It was an unconscious celebration of patriarchal violence. And Simon's dumb joke about the game's bias. That was a textbook example of a microaggression, trivializing real systemic issues with humor. I was completely blindsided. I tried to defend them. I explained that this is just how they are, that there's no malicious intent behind any of it. It's just banter. She put her hand on my arm and gave me a sympathetic look. She wasn't angry with me. She was concerned for me. She said she understood. That I had been immersed in this echo chamber for so long that I couldn't see it for what it was. She said she wanted to help me see it. That night, I brushed it off as an overreaction. She was just different from my friends, and the two worlds had collided awkwardly. No big deal. We'd find a balance. I was wrong. That night was the beginning of a pattern. It became a thing. Anytime I mentioned my friends, it was an invitation for a lecture. If I told her Simon got a promotion at work, she would explain how the corporate ladder was an inherently patriarchal structure that rewarded aggressive male traits. It wasn't that Simon earned it, it was that the system was built for him. If I mentioned Ray was planning a weekend camping trip by himself, it wasn't just a guy wanting to enjoy nature. It was an example of male emotional evasion, an inability to foster intimacy, leading to a need to escape into the wilderness. Every story, every anecdote was filtered through this lens. She was constantly educating me, raising my consciousness. I started to become guarded. I'd tell her I was going out, but be vague about who with. I'd recount my day, but leave out the parts that involved my friends, just to avoid the inevitable psychoanalysis of our interactions. It was exhausting. It felt like I was dating a cultural critic who was permanently assigned to my life. Then came the next phase. She decided it was time for me to be integrated into her social circle. She described her friends as conscious and aware. I was about to find out what that meant. She took me to a get-together at her friend's apartment. The vibe was completely alien to me. It was quiet, almost sterile. Everyone spoke in low, considerate tones. The men in her circle were a strange breed. They seemed terrified of saying the wrong thing. They'd start a sentence, then pause, and rephrase it to be more inclusive. They'd make self-deprecating jokes about their own privilege. One guy literally apologized for taking up too much space in a conversation. I tried to just be my normal self. I told a funny story about a frustrating bug I'd fixed at work. I used a bit of hyperbole, describing the code as a monster. The story was met with blank stares. One of Isabel's friends then asked me if using violent language like monster to describe a problem was a healthy coping mechanism. I felt like I was in a zoo. I was the specimen being observed. Every word I said was being weighed and judged. Isabel was in her element, navigating the conversation with ease, while I just stood there, nodding and trying not to say anything that could be misinterpreted. The car ride home was quiet. I didn't know what to say. She finally broke the silence by telling me she was proud of me. Proud of me for what? For surviving a 2-hour social event without committing a thought crime? She said her friends thought I was receptive and had potential. It felt less like a compliment and more like a performance review. This just made me miss my own friends more. With them, I didn't have to be receptive. I could just be. I didn't have to worry about my words being put under a microscope. The tension came to a head a few weeks later. It was a big game night, a new release we'd all been waiting for. We were all supposed to meet at Ray's place. Isabel insisted on coming with me. I tried to suggest that maybe it would be more fun for her if she had a night to herself, but she was adamant. She said she wanted to make an effort and understand my world. The evening started off okay. The guys were on their best behavior. They were polite, included her in the conversation. Simon was clearly biting his tongue, sticking to safe topics. But you can only keep that up for so long. We were a few hours in. Pizza was eaten, a few beers were had. Everyone was starting to relax. A commercial came on during a break in the game. It was for some kind of sports drink, featuring a famous female athlete. Simon, in a moment of his old, unfiltered self, made a joke. It wasn't even that bad. It was a dumb, sarcastic comment about the over-the-top, dramatic tone of the ad. Something like, "Wow, I didn't know drinking that gave you the power to bend space and time." It wasn't about her being a woman. It was about the ad being cheesy. But Isabel's head snapped around. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice cutting through the room. Simon was taken aback. "What? It's a dumb commercial." She didn't let it go. She told him that his comment was a subtle way of diminishing a powerful woman's accomplishments by mocking her portrayal, that he was uncomfortable with a woman being shown as strong, so he had to resort to sarcasm to feel superior. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Ray, ever the diplomat, tried to de-escalate. "Hey, I think it was just a joke about the special effects." Isabel turned to him. "It's not just a joke. Language matters, and that language perpetuates the idea that female strength is something to be ridiculed." Simon just stared at her. His face was a mixture of anger and disbelief. He opened his mouth to say something, then just shook his head, stood up, and said he needed some air. He walked out onto Ray's balcony. The night was completely ruined. We left shortly after. The car ride home was a pressure cooker of silence. I knew a storm was coming. The second we walked into my apartment, it started. It wasn't a lecture this time. It was a tirade. She wasn't just analyzing, she was accusing. Simon was the main target. He was a toxic influence. He was a closet misogynist who used irony to hide his real beliefs. She was shocked that I couldn't see it. She said his presence was actively harmful to me and to her. She claimed she didn't feel safe in a room with that kind of negative energy. I argued back, for the first time with any real heat. I told her she had completely misread the situation, that she had embarrassed me and insulted my best friend in his own friend's home. She looked at me with genuine pity. "They're not your friends, Darren. They're your crutch. They keep you stagnant. They prevent you from growing into a better man." This was the new narrative. It wasn't just that my friends were flawed. It was that they were actively sabotaging my potential, and that she was the only one who could save me from them. After that night, things got worse. The sabotage became more overt. She started planning things for us on the nights I usually saw the guys. Romantic dinners, surprise movie nights, always non-negotiable. If I had plans to go to Simon's, she would suddenly feel unwell right before I was about to leave. A sudden headache, a wave of anxiety. She'd ask me to stay with her. How could I say no? How do you tell your girlfriend that you think her sudden illness is conveniently timed? I felt like a coward. I'd text the guys with a lame excuse. "Sorry, something came up." Feeling under the weather. They never gave me a hard time, but I could feel the distance growing. The inside jokes were happening without me. They were playing games I hadn't even heard of. I was being slowly and methodically, surgically removed from my own life. I felt a constant low-grade resentment simmering inside me. Resentment toward her for putting me in this position, and resentment toward myself for letting it happen. My relationship with my friends became strained. My relationship with her became a tightrope walk over a pit of potential arguments. The breaking point was building, and I knew it. The final piece of the puzzle was the annual trip. For the last 10 years, since we finished high school, the four of us have had a tradition. Once a year, usually in the summer, we rent a cabin by a lake for a long weekend. It's the one event that is absolutely sacred. No girlfriends, no wives, no work. Just us. We fish, we grill, we sit around a campfire and talk until 3 a.m. It's the highlight of our year. It's our reset button. I knew bringing this up with Isabel was going to be a problem. I postponed it for as long as I could. Finally, about a month before the trip, I had to tell her. The booking was confirmed. I tried to frame it as gently as possible. I sat her down on the couch. I explained the tradition, how long we'd been doing it, and what it meant to me. I watched her face as I spoke. Her expression went from neutral to tense to cold. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. Then she asked, "So it's a no girls allowed club?" I tried to explain that it wasn't about excluding anyone. It was just about having this one weekend for us to connect, just the four of us, like we always have. She saw it differently. It was, in her words, a ritual of patriarchal bonding, a regression into adolescent male behavior, a weekend dedicated to reinforcing the toxic norms she was trying so hard to help me unlearn. The argument that followed was the biggest one we'd ever had. She accused me of not being serious about our relationship, of prioritizing a childish boys' trip over her comfort and our future together. I pushed back. I told her that this trip was important to me, that my friendships were important to me, and that I wasn't going to give them up. The fight didn't resolve anything. It ended with her going into the bedroom and slamming the door. We lived in a state of cold war for the next week. We barely spoke. The air in the apartment was thick with tension. I knew a final confrontation was coming. I just didn't know how it would play out. She thought she was backing me into a corner. She thought she was making me choose between my past and my future. In reality, she was just making the choice clearer than it had ever been before. The week leading up to the trip was probably the worst of my entire life. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. We were living in the same apartment, but it felt like we were separated by a pane of soundproof glass. The silence was deafening. Every small noise, like a fork clicking on a plate or the turning of a page, felt like a gunshot. We'd eat breakfast at the same table without looking at each other. She'd be scrolling through her phone with a grim, focused expression. I'd be staring into my coffee cup as if it held the answers to the universe. We slept in the same bed, but on opposite edges, a frozen sea of duvet between us. Her silent treatment wasn't passive. It was active. It was a weapon. It was designed to make me feel the weight of her disapproval in every moment of every day. She'd sigh dramatically whenever I walked into a room. If I asked her a direct question, she'd answer with the bare minimum number of words, her voice flat and devoid of any emotion. Yes, no, it's fine. It's fine was the worst. We all know it's fine is the universal code for a storm of apocalyptic rage is brewing behind this calm facade. She was making me work for every single interaction. She was making me feel the friction, the heavy cost of my decision to not immediately capitulate to her demands. A couple of times, I almost broke. The pressure was immense. I thought about just giving in, about calling Simon and telling him I couldn't make it, just to make the silence stop, just to have peace in my own home again. But then I'd think about what that would mean. It would mean I was letting her win, not just winning an argument, but winning control over my life, over my identity. It would mean admitting that my friendships, my history, were less valuable than her ideology. It would mean cutting off the guys who had been there for me through everything, bad breakups, family emergencies, career setbacks, the guys who had never asked for anything but my company. And for what? So I could be molded into someone her conscious friends would approve of. So I could be her project? No, I couldn't do it. So I held firm. I continued to prepare for the trip, doing my laundry, checking my fishing gear. Each normal action felt like an act of quiet rebellion. The night before I was due to leave, the Cold War finally ended, and the hot war began. I was in the bedroom, packing my duffel bag. I was trying to be quiet, methodical. A pair of jeans, a few t-shirts, a warm hoodie. She was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching me. She hadn't said a word for 10 minutes. Her arms were crossed, and her eyes were just burning into me. I could feel her stare on the back of my neck. I finally zipped up the bag and turned to face her. I was ready for it, whatever it was. She finally spoke. Her voice was dangerously calm, which was always a bad sign. She told me she had been doing a lot of thinking, about us, about our future. She said she had invested so much emotional labor into our relationship. She had tried to be patient. She had tried to guide me. She laid out her case like a prosecutor giving a closing argument. She wasn't just my girlfriend, she explained. She was trying to be my partner in growth. She saw so much potential in me, but it was being suffocated. It was being suffocated by my refusal to let go of the toxic attachments of my past. And my friends, she said, were the embodiment of that toxicity. Simon, in particular, was the ringleader. She launched into a full character assassination of my best friend. His sarcasm wasn't a defense mechanism. It was a weapon used to maintain his male ego. His cynicism wasn't a worldview. It was a refusal to engage with the world's problems in a meaningful way. His loyalty to us wasn't a virtue. It was a symptom of a tribalistic pack mentality that was inherently exclusionary to women. I just stood there and listened. It was so detached from reality, so clinical. It was like she was describing a character in a textbook, not a person I had known my entire life. She then brought it back to me. She said this trip was a symbolic choice. It was a fork in the road. Down one path was the future. A future with her. A future of awareness, of being a better, more evolved man. A future where we could build something real, based on shared values. Down the other path was the past. Stagnation. A weekend of performative masculinity in the woods, drinking beer and telling the same old stories, reinforcing the same old bad habits. She was painting a picture where the choice was between enlightenment and Neanderthalism. Then came the hammer. I can't be with a man who actively chooses to remain in a toxic environment, she said, her voice finally cracking with a bit of rehearsed emotion. I love you, Darren, and that's why this is so hard. But I have to protect my own mental and emotional well-being. So, you need to make a choice, a real one, right now. You can stay. You can unpack that bag, and we can start fresh. You can tell your friends you're not coming. You can tell them you're choosing to move forward. You can finally cut ties with the people who are holding you back, especially Simon. She took a deep breath. Or you can walk out that door. But if you do, you're not just leaving for the weekend. You're leaving for good. This is it. It's them, or it's me. She stood there, triumphant. She had laid her trap perfectly. She genuinely believed in that moment that she had won. She expected me to crumble, to drop the bag, to apologize, to promise to change, to finally become the project she always wanted to complete. I looked at her. I really looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't see the woman I'd fallen for. I saw a stranger, a zealot who saw the world not as a collection of people, but as a collection of ideologies. I saw someone who didn't love me for who I was, but for who she thought she could turn me into. All the anxiety, all the resentment, all the pressure from the past few months just evaporated. In its place was a profound, ice-cold clarity. There was no choice to be made. The choice had already been made for me by her actions. I picked up my duffel bag. It felt lighter than it had a minute ago. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Okay." Just that one word. The look on her face was something I will never forget. It was a cascade of emotions. Confidence, then confusion, then disbelief, then sheer, unadulterated shock. Her mouth opened slightly. "Okay? What do you mean, okay?" I walked past her, out of the bedroom. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. She followed me to the front door, her voice rising in pitch. "You're serious? You're actually choosing them? After everything? After all the work I've put into us? Into you?" I stopped at the door and turned back to her. "They're my friends," I said, my voice as calm as I'd ever heard it. "They've known me for over 15 years and have never, not once, tried to change who I am. They just accept me. You've known me for less than a year, and all you've tried to do is tear down my life and rebuild it into something you find acceptable." "So yeah," I said, putting my hand on the doorknob. "I'm choosing them. We're done, Isabel." I opened the door and walked out. I didn't slam it. I just closed it quietly behind me. I walked down the hall, down the stairs, and out into the cool night air. I didn't look back. The drive up to the cabin was surreal. It was about a 3-hour trip. For the first hour, I just drove in silence. No radio, nothing. Just the hum of the engine and the sound of the tires on the pavement. My mind was empty. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just numb, like I'd just been through some kind of surgery. Then, a strange feeling started to creep in. It was relief. It was a massive, overwhelming wave of relief. I felt a weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying just lift off my shoulders. The constant tension in my jaw, the tightness in my chest. It was gone. I could breathe again. I pulled into a gas station, filled up the tank, and went inside to grab a coffee. As I was standing in line, I realized I was smiling. A genuine, unforced smile. I finally got up to the cabin a little after midnight. The lights were on, and I could hear music and laughter from inside. I took a deep breath before I walked in. The moment I opened the door, all three of them looked up. Simon was the first to speak. "Look what the cat dragged in. We were about to send out a search party." I managed a weak smile. I dropped my bag on the floor. Ray, ever the observant one, looked at me, then at my single bag. His expression changed. "Hey man, you okay?" And just like that, it all came out. I told them everything. The constant critiques, the lectures, the attempt to integrate me into her social circle, the sabotaged plans. I told them about the fight over the trip, the week of Cold War, and the final ultimatum. I expected them to be angry on my behalf. I expected an "I told you so" from Simon. But that's not what I got. They just listened, patiently. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then Simon stood up, walked over to the fridge, and grabbed a beer. He opened it and handed it to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. "You made the right call," he said, his voice serious, all the usual sarcasm gone. "We've got your back, always." Ray and Eugene nodded in agreement. There was no gloating, no celebration, just quiet, unwavering support. They understood. And that's when I knew, with 100% certainty, that I had absolutely made the right decision. The rest of the weekend was exactly what I needed. We didn't talk about Isabel again. We didn't need to. We just fell back into our old rhythm. We spent the next day out on the lake, fishing. We didn't catch much, but it didn't matter. We just sat in the boat, enjoying the sun and the peace. We made a massive barbecue that evening. We sat around the campfire for hours, telling stupid stories from high school. For the first time in months, I felt completely, utterly myself. I didn't have to watch my words. I didn't have to analyze my own thoughts. I could just exist. I was home. When I got back to the city on Sunday night, I went to my empty apartment. It felt strange, quiet. But it wasn't the oppressive, hostile quiet of the week before. It was a peaceful quiet. It was my space again. I had a bunch of missed calls and a wall of text messages from her. I didn't read them. I just deleted the entire conversation thread. Then I went on social media and saw she had already unfriended me. A few hours later, I saw through a mutual acquaintance's page that she had posted a long, vague status update. It was all about the painful but necessary process of removing toxic elements from one's life, and the disappointment of realizing someone you care about isn't willing to do the work of personal growth. It was so predictable, so self-serving. She was already spinning the narrative to make herself the hero, the victim. I wasn't even angry. It was almost funny. I blocked her number. I blocked her on every platform I could think of. I was done. It was time for a clean break. Life started to go back to normal, or a new kind of normal. I saw my friends more. We fell back into our easy routine. Game nights, movie nights. It felt like I was reconnecting a vital part of myself that had been unplugged. My work improved. My sleep improved. I just felt lighter. A month or two went by. Life was good, quiet, but good. Then one day, I got a message from that former colleague whose birthday party I'd met Isabel at. We weren't close, but we were friendly. She was asking how I was doing. We exchanged some pleasantries, and then she dropped the bomb. She told me she had been at a friend's place the other night, and Isabel was there. And apparently, I was the main topic of conversation. Isabel had spent a good 20 minutes complaining to the group about her dating life. She went on a long rant about how impossible it was to find a good man. She talked about how men were emotionally stunted, how they were afraid of commitment, and how they were too fragile to handle being challenged by a strong woman. And then she said it. The line that brought everything full circle. She looked at the group with a perfectly straight face and said, "It feels like all the decent guys are already taken, and the rest are just emotionally unavailable misogynists. There are no good men left." My colleague said the lack of self-awareness was so staggering, the whole room was just awkwardly silent. When she told me that, I just started laughing. A real, deep belly laugh. The irony was just too perfect. She had found a good guy. A guy who cared about her, who was loyal, who was willing to grow with her. And she had systematically driven him away because he wasn't the right kind of good guy. He didn't fit her pre-approved, ideologically pure mold. She hadn't dodged a bullet. She had been the one holding the gun, and she had shot herself in the foot. And now she was out there, alone, complaining about the very problem she had created for herself. The story ends here, really. It's a few months later now. I'm sitting in my apartment. It's clean. It's peaceful. Simon and Ray are on my couch. Eugene is on his way. We're arguing about whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. A classic, meaningless, wonderful argument. There's pizza on the coffee table. And I'm happy. Genuinely happy. Looking back, Isabel used to talk a lot about toxic masculinity, but I've learned that toxicity doesn't have a gender. It's a behavior. It's trying to control someone. It's isolating them from their support system. It's making your love conditional on them becoming a different person. She thought she was saving me from my friends. Turns out, my friends were the ones who saved me from her.